Welcome to this GiftWorks video. My name is Jonathan Lehman. This video is the third video in a 5-part video series on GiftWorks Volunteers. GiftWorks Volunteers is an additional add-in that can be purchased that works with any of the current versions of the GiftWorks fundraising software. In the prior videos in this video series, I've already covered how you can establish and manage volunteer profiles. Volunteer profiles provide an additional a way of identifying additional information about a donor, such as the skill sets that they have and when they would be available to volunteer for your organization. I've also showed how you can establish and manage jobs. When you do that, you establish the desired and required skill sets for that job and the dates and times that you would need people to be available for that job. I also discussed how when you establish a volunteer profile, at that point they're still not available to be assigned to a job until you put them through the volunteer screening process and accept them that they've gone through the volunteer screening process. Once you've done that, they're available to be assigned to jobs. In this video, we're going to cover how the process to assign a job to a volunteer or a volunteer to a job and look at that matching process. Begin by signing into GiftWorks. If you've installed the Volunteers add-in, you will have an additional option on your toolbar called Volunteers. I'll click on that. It brings you to the landing page, which most activities within Volunteers you can initiate from this point. Now, there are several different ways in which you can assign a volunteer to a job or a job to a volunteer within the Volunteers add-in. I'm going to show you an option from the landing page here, Match Up Volunteers and Job. I'll click that option. And the first choice I get is whether I want to kind of look at this from a job perspective or a volunteer perspective. The first option is match a job with volunteers. I'm basically going to be looking at a job, selecting a job, and then looking at all the volunteers that might be available and have the desired skill, have the correct skills to be assigned to that job. Or if I select this option, I'm looking at a particular volunteer profile and reviewing what jobs that might be available and that they might be skilled to be assigned to. So let's start with the first option. We'll look at matching a job with volunteers. I'll select that option and click next, and I'll key in office or part of office, and I found the job office assistant. I can click on that. It shows me additional information. You can see the jobs open. There's 2 open assignments. And I can click next. If I have the right job, I click next. It takes me to a screen where it's going to suggest some volunteers that can be assigned to that job. Now, how does it do that? Well, it looks at the job office assistant, and it looks at the desired and required skills that we set up. And then it looks at the volunteers, and it compares the skill sets that you've set up for those volunteer profiles. It also looks at when it looks at the job, and it looks at the dates and times that are required for that job, and then it looks at each of the volunteer and looks at their availability, and it matches those up. It does that. It uses an algorithm, and it comes up with a suggested status between high, medium, and low, and it sorts them in that order. So you can kind of look at your volunteers and look at the ones that are the most desirable. You have different options up here at the top in your search parameters where you can change that list. I could select all and say that I want to see all those that have been suggested, or I can there's some additional comments it puts here in this section over here. One of the comments it puts in red is, well, it puts if they're missing any of the required skills. It also puts the comments if they've already been assigned to jobs. Any comments that might be helpful it puts there. I could say, I want to hide any volunteers that are already assigned to a job. I want to look for volunteers that aren't already assigned, so I can do that and click go. You can see my list got smaller. I can also say, I want to limit my list to 10. You could also just say, I don't want to see anybody that doesn't have the required skills. So you have different ways that you can change this list. Once you do that, you might want to, there's other ways you can sort of operate here. If you want to see more information, a lot of the information you can get here about the dates that are required for the job and the skills that are required. So you can kind of look at that all here. For the volunteer profile, if you want to kind of review, you're looking at any one of these 3 look like they're rated as high. But if I want to see more information about the profile, I can either select and click View Profile down here, or right click and click View Profile here. So let's say I want to look at Jackie's profile and kind of see when she said she'd be available. I could compare that to the job, kind of review her skills again. Just look at that. Once I feel comfortable, I can again either select Jackie here and click Assign Volunteer down here, or I can right click and click Assign here. So we'll click Assign. I pick a start date. I know they want to start on December 1st. That's when the job starts. I can put any kind of comments I want, and I can click next, and they ask me just to confirm that, and I can click assign. You notice now that I only have one open assignment, so it's got 2 positions and one has been filled. The job is still open. So I can assign one of these other persons to the job. So let me also assign Nellie Gold. I can click assign. And again, we'll say December 1st is the start date, and I can click next and assign. So now you can see the job went to a filled status and there are no more openings. Let's look at it from a different perspective. Let's look at it from the volunteer perspective. So let me go to match up volunteers and jobs again. Let me select this option, match a volunteer with jobs, and we'll pick Jackie, who we set up in the prior videos. Again, we can select this and kind of review some information. We can see the skills. We can also see her availability. And we can let's see here, we can see that she's already assigned to be an office assistant. We can click next. Brings me to the same kind of suggestion screen. In this case, we're looking at the volunteer, and it's giving me a list of suggested jobs. And I have a little bit of different search criteria. I can hide jobs with required skills that don't match the volunteer's skills. So if one of these jobs has some required skills, but Jackie doesn't have those skills, I can choose to hide those. I can also, again, here limit the number. I have many of the similar options where I can see information about Jackie here. If I want some more information about one of the jobs, I can click on it. I can either right click and click view job details. I could just click it and click view job details. And we can look at more information, kind of look at the job. So it looks like another job that Jackie might be available to would be to do general clerical work. Now she's missing the required skills of computer and internet services, but in this case, I'm not going to worry about that. I'm going to assign Jackie to this job also. This job she's not going to start until next year. I could put a comment if I want about maybe missing the required skills or something. Maybe we know that that's going to work out in this case, and we click assign. So now we can look at Jackie, and we can see now that she's been assigned to 2 jobs. So that you can look at it either from a job perspective or from a volunteer perspective. Now there's several other different areas you can also, when you're looking at a volunteer over here, you can assign them to a job. Right-clicking and assign to a job. You can be managing jobs over here, and you can right-click on them, and you can assign a volunteer to them. You can also be viewing them. Oops, I didn't mean to take that option. You can also be viewing them. And one of the things I want to show you is that it always makes sure that it steps you through whatever is necessary. So that's here. I'm looking at I'm looking at Sheila, and I'm going to try to assign her to a job. It's going to first prompt me to go through the screening process. So that's an example of the steps. It will take you through the necessary steps to make sure that before you're assigning them to a job, that the necessary steps have been taken. I can also, let's say I find let me go over to the volunteers. If I go to manage jobs, let me find a job that's already filled. So if I find a job that's filled, we don't need anyone else in this job. If I go to assign someone to the job, so I'm looking at the job and I say assign a volunteer. It's going to ask me, it's going to say basically this job is filled. I can just say no, that's okay. I didn't realize that. We'll leave the job filled. Or if I click assign a volunteer, I can say yes. I want to increase. I'm going to add another volunteer, so I'm going to increase the number of volunteers from 2 to 3. And so now it adds an additional position, and I can go ahead and go through my assignment process. There might be times where specifically someone called you up and you don't need to go through that search process, and they said they're going to be available to work for a job. They're going to be available. So again, if you're looking at manage volunteers, I could go down to Jackie here again. I could say assign to a job, and I get where I can either go through that suggestion process or I can pick a particular job. So I can say, well, she's available to help serve food and community meals. So you can also just do specific jobs if that's what you need to do. We'll have her starting that today. And that works that way both from the volunteer perspective and also from the job perspective. So if I go to manage jobs, we'll pick an after school tutor, assign a volunteer. Again, I can go through the matching process where it's going to give me a list of suggested volunteers, or if I know a specific volunteer that I want to assign to the job, I can do that and pick that volunteer and assign them. This one gave me an error because they already have an active assignment for that job. So there's lots of different ways. It gives you the ability to both search and to have it provide you suggestions, or if your processes or procedures are more that you're going to someone calls in and they're actually volunteering to work for a job and they have the right skills, you can just go and just pick that person directly if you need to. So it gives you a lot of flexibility. We hope this helps you understand that process. In future videos, we'll show you now how you can manage those job assignments. Thank you for watching this video.